From Las Vegas, Nevada, the entertainment capital of the world, I'm David Gabry, and this is the Vegas Faces Podcast, where we talk with Las Vegas locals about what it's really like to live in the City of Lights. Whether you're living in Vegas, moving to Vegas, or just visiting Vegas and looking for new adventures, together let's discover the hidden gems that make Sin City the most visited place on earth. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Vegas Faces, another episode. I'm David Gavry, and here we are. We've got a fun episode for you today. We've got a stacked lineup. We've got Bay in the house. Hey. We've got Noel in the house. Whoop, whoop. We've got Steven in the house.
Hey there.
We've got Michelle in the house.
It's always a party.
This is a fun one. We were making martinis. Now we're at gin and tonics.
This is what we call mortgage and martinis. And we're going to get right into it because, you know, the real estate market, the mortgage market, everybody wants to know what is going on. And we have two amazing experts. We have Steven, a New Yorker who moved to Las Vegas 9 years ago. We have Noel, and you'll hear his gorgeous accent in a minute. And he is from the UK, and he's been doing mortgages here in Las Vegas for 6 years. And we really want to dive in since we're so we want to really get to know what the mortgage process is like for the average consumer, what you guys are seeing in the market. We want to know how people can get a mortgage, get around what's going on a little bit, and get more versed on the process. So welcome,
also, what's
guys.
the company?
They are with United Mortgage, and you have an office here, satellite office here in Las Vegas, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, awesome. So welcome, you guys. And so let's dive right into it. So right now, so you guys are frontline. You're seeing what's going on in the market. What's your advice? What are you trying to convey to consumers right now? You know, people who, let's say, you know, first-time home buyers. What are you trying to convey to them currently?
Well, I think that they're scared because they're seeing the interest rates are higher than they've been in a long time. And it's difficult for them to see the forest through the trees, if you will. We were talking off the air just before saying that there is an imbalance with the amount of houses that are for sale throughout the United States. And since 2007, there's been 34 million people who have added to the population of the United States.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, in you know, just less than 20 years.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Plus, 2 million house formations happen every single year naturally.
Okay. Wow.
People reproducing and so on and so forth, right? So, on a good year, a home builder or all of the home builders combined can only produce about 1.4 million houses. And if you have 2 million housing formations in a year period, the demand is always going to outweigh the supply. Mm-hmm. So if you look at companies like Case-Shiller, FHFA, these are companies that keep statistics on everything. They're talking about 10% appreciation in the year 2023, even with rates being where they are. So when you quantify that, you take a $500,000 house. If it's a 10% appreciation, you're talking about $50,000, the same house, in a year from now.
Right.
Right? So that's where I try to say, okay, your rate's high. Maybe the payment's a little bit higher than, you know, you are comfortable with right now.
Right.
But if you acquire the property now, you're going to stand to make that 10% appreciation. And over time, you'll have the opportunity to refinance out of the loan or reduce your mortgage insurance or eliminate your mortgage insurance. So your mortgage payment could actually go down. Mm-hmm. If you're renting, pretty much it's almost a guarantee that when your lease is up, you can expect a rate increase or a rent increase. So it's about taking that leap. And it's about understanding that the payment that you have today doesn't necessarily mean it's the payment that you're going to have going forward and forever.
Can you maybe touch base a little bit, one of you guys, talk about to the younger people? Let's say you're 25 years old, you have a good W-2 job, and obviously sometimes rent could be a little cheaper than a mortgage. Can you explain how that's a savings account when you own a home and how people really don't understand that concept?
I will say that when I was in my 20s doing stand-up comedy in Chicago, I used to think that like, oh, why would I ever buy a house? Like, that's so much money. Why not just rent for, and at the time I was literally renting for like $500 a month. So I'm like, oh, I could just do that. And I understand that mindset, like someone young in their 20s that just looks at the math on paper, not even understanding what equity is, not even understanding like literally how to build wealth. It's just mathematical equation that's like, oh, 500 a month or like 500,000, not even knowing what that gets you down the road. They're just looking at the day to day. So how would you explain it in like layman terms, the concept of equity and just what that looks like for someone who maybe mid 20s, early 30s wants to buy a home, but looks at the rates, sees the price tag on the houses and is like, nah, I'm just going to keep renting.
It's hard, isn't it? Because when you're in your 20s, I think that the money that you have, necessarily you're not thinking of it in the long term, right? It's there and it's a tool to use now. And I think that's why many people, fall into like myself as well. I mean, I have owned 3 houses and I've never lived in one of them. And for me, it was always more of like that.
I think what Noel is trying to say, it's hard to be forward thinking in your 20s. You're typically just getting started in your career. You might not be making as much and you might not be established. But if you purchase the home now or soon, it's going to go up in value. I mean, that's almost, you can look at statistical charts dating back to the 1940s of house appreciation, and it pretty much goes up in a straight line. Of course, there's a couple of times where there was dips, but even with those dips, they're breaking new records, right? The average median house in the United States is higher than it's ever been. If you take that into consideration, I think people don't look at it so much from when you're making that payment, you're also paying down the loan. So it's going in two directions. The value of the house is increasing while the amount that you owe on the loan is decreasing at its simplest terms. And that variance or that difference is called your equity. Now, there's a lot that you can do with that. You could eventually sell that house, take the profit that you made and roll it over into maybe something bigger, or you can borrow against it and you can do home improvements, or you can put kids through college, or you can consolidate debt. There's a lot that you can do with the equity in the house that you're making your money work for you by just making your payments. I mean, if you're making rent payments, that's all well and good. Shelter is one of the main components of life, right? So you have to have a roof over your head at some point, but you'll pay forever and not walk away with any equity.
I think people also need to take into consideration that equity is almost like a savings account, right? So the equity you have on your home is essentially your money. The equity that you're paying into, that's your money exactly to send your kids to college, do home improvements. Eventually, when you sell, let's say you've paid off, $200,000 off of your house, that is your money. It goes back into your pocket. When you pay a landlord, you're basically paying off their equity. So not only are you paying off and giving them sort of a free mortgage on their property, but you're essentially giving them money into their quote unquote savings account, which is their equity. So people really, really aren't versed in that. And I don't even know that we were versed in that in our early 30s. Really.
I definitely wasn't.
Yeah.
Like you kind of helped me with that.
Hey, listen, we just bought our first house and, I'm 40. And so we bought our first house in our late 30s. Best decision we ever made, but obviously it's a very scary process for a lot of people. Let's take it back a little bit, you guys. Let's talk a little bit. I mean, this podcast is really about Vegas. We know mortgages are fascinating to people, but tell us, so Stephen, you're from New York and you've been here for 9 years. Have you primarily been working in the mortgage industry the whole time?
For the last 3 decades, I've been in the mortgage industry.
Wow, so you've seen it all.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's fascinating. And no, have you always been in mortgages or?
No, actually, before I came to Vegas, I worked in the watch and jewelry industry.
Oh, wow.
Yes, for a brand called Storm.
Wow.
So they made like really quirky watch, different pioneering designs of different ways of telling time. They was really renowned for that, which I'm surprised because I don't see the brand anywhere here in America. However, if I'm to travel around Europe or even I've been in parts of Asia and I've seen the brand, the heavy presence out there, never seen it in America though. And I found out since being here that they just could never get distributorship in America. So that's why it was never here. But
us Americans, we're always just never as cool as anybody in the UK.
Not with that accent. That accent immediately makes you cool.
We can sit here and talk about Diet Coke, and I am just like, yes, you Tell me about Diet Coke right now. I'm only saying Diet Coke because it's right in front of Stephen is drinking a Diet Coke. Tell me what are your thoughts about Diet Coke?
Right. I'm interested in how both of you ended up in Vegas, from all the way across the pond in the UK and all the way across the country on the East Coast. What brought you to Vegas? And the reason we even have this podcast, we're really fascinated with why Vegas. When we moved here, people looked at us like we were nuts. They're like, you're going to live in Vegas? What, are you going to live at the Bellagio? Like, you got a gambling problem or something? Like, they look at you like you're some kind of like degenerate almost. So and then we meet people that are actually, quote unquote, normal jobs. Like, yes, hospitality is a huge presence here, but also there are other jobs too. So I'm always interested in what brought you to Vegas.
Let me tell you, outside of like my small town that I lived in, outside of a bigger city called Manchester in the UK.
Manchester.
When you think of Vegas, it's a strip of hotels and casinos. Yeah. That is all it is.
Yeah.
And boy, were my eyes opened when I actually came here for vacation, because we did a lot of excursions, went to the Grand Canyon and stuff, but we had to travel from the Strip to, I think it might have been Henderson Airport or another airport. And then I'm starting to see suburbia.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait a minute, this is a real city. This isn't just a landing strip in the desert with hotels and clubs.
Yeah.
That is literally all I thought that it was, just a party strip. And I had no idea about any of the neighborhoods, any of the areas. But I think when you actually see it in its entirety, it's mesmerizing. It's like, wow, it is actually a big, thriving metropolis.
Yeah.
It has other things. It's not just hospitality,
David and I, honestly, we feel like it's a hidden gem that's not really that hidden. I mean, people are
finding out about it now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the housing market here shows signs that people have caught on that this is a great city. The secret's out. But I always say this. I say, right now, there is somebody from Japan sitting for 20 hours on an airplane just to come visit the city. And we get to just live in it. Like, it does feel like a sort of wow, factor.
Take that, Phoenix.
Take that, Phoenix. Yeah.
No one's on a
all right,
20-hour
Stephen, you came from New York.
Right.
That's fascinating too, because you do see a lot of Chicago, New York, big city people. What brought you here? What has been your experience? And what would you tell people that are thinking about moving here?
Well, I think what Chicago and New York and Los Angeles all have in common are high taxes and high cost of living. Really, it's what it all came down to. It was such a rat race working in New York. And before my wife and I had our first kid, it was great, right? She was in investment banking. I was in mortgages. And that was all well and good. And then when we had a kid, it was like, you need babysitters, or her mother was watching the kid for 16 hours a day because she was on trains at 5:30 in the morning through the snow and freezing cold and rain and humidity and you name it,
Yeah.
And then this was an opportunity to reduce the overall cost of living for us, right? I've been able to be the only one who's been working and raise a family, which would be next to impossible in a high cost of living state like New York. And, it's been really good for us. I think we're a healthier group of people. There's so much more outdoor activity. You can enjoy the weather all year round. And, there's so many places that you can jump off to here. You're right. You can get to California very easily. Oh, yeah. Arizona, Utah.
Hop in your car right now and you could be in 3 hours anywhere in the West Coast.
Yeah. So it definitely offers a lot of that, and just for us a better way to raise our family.
Right.
That's how we felt too. We were like, do we want to spend hours just layering up everybody?
Right.
And then to walk to the train station and then wait for the train and then transfer to a bus to another train. It's just like, okay, let's go somewhere where we can at least just walk outside and start our life.
Yeah.
I also want to introduce Michelle, because Michelle's only been here a few months, moved here from Chicago. And I'm curious to get Michelle's thoughts on what brought you to Vegas and what made you interested in Vegas and why the leap other than weather? I mean, we were
and
just
me because we've known
each other since 8th grade, so of course I have to come for Mary. Oh, and you too, David, of course. So my name is Michelle. I'm like waving like people can see me. Like you guys can't see me wave. My name is Michelle, and I swear it's not even a martini because I'm not drinking. My name is Michelle. Moved from the Chicago suburbs end of May. My fiance was always talking about getting out of Illinois, the taxes, the weather, just, everything that these guys have already spoken about. And I was always like, no, I'm never leaving. My family's here, blah, blah, blah. And he always wanted to move to Florida. And that's why I was always like, no, I can't do the humidity. It's disgusting. You're wet. Can't do it. But Vegas was never an option until I started talking to Mary, and she would tell me all the great things about Las Vegas. And then I started being like, okay, well, maybe it is an option.
You were also creeping my Instagram a lot and commenting.
Totally creeping our Instagram. Yes. And I was like, this bitch is living her best life. Yes. I can say bitch, right? Yes. This bitch is living her best life, and I'm over here in the freezing cold. So then I was like, the older I get, the more I'm like, I feel like I was being very like, I hate the weather. I hate Chicago. I was very like, almost like a crabby old lady living there.
You hit a point. You definitely hit at first, because I lived in Texas and I went to college in Arizona. So I had only known heat. So for me, it was an adventure, like the snow.
Yeah.
Until one day I was like, oh man, it's just like aging me. Like I felt myself like just
absolutely.
Like it went from like, oh, this is fun to like, all right, this is ridiculous.
I feel like everyone around this table has got that in common. New York, I've spent Christmas in New York. It was absolutely unbearable. It was treacherous. I'm from the north of England. Like that is, you've heard the saying, winter is coming.
Yeah.
Right? Yes. Yeah. When you said that, I'm from the north, like with that accent, I was like, I immediately thought Game of Thrones.
Winter is coming. It is. It was treacherous. And Chicago, I've heard stories from you.
Can you say Chicago in a American accent?
Chicago.
No one actually says that. I love when people say that because no one actually says Chicago.
Right?
I've never once heard anybody be like, I'm from Chicago. Like,
I just needed to hear a British man say Chicago. That's it.
That's all I know.
Sorry. That was on my bucket list.
I feel like we have to say cheers that we all came from these cold places. And here we are in the desert now. Cheers to all
desert dwellers.
All right, you guys, let's get back into mortgages.
I want to start with, everyone's always focused on the rates. And I know that that's kind of like cliche at this point, and maybe you're probably sick of being asked that question. But every day, like when you listen to like CNBC, it's always like, okay, what's the Fed doing? What's happening now? Fed did this, Fed did that. Fed's going to do this. What are your professional thoughts and perspectives on what you see happening for the rest of the year and maybe the next year?
That's a tough question to ask, or to answer rather. But what I think is kind of interesting is when you watch CNBC, they talk about homes breaking new records in terms of appreciation as if it's a bad thing. If the stock market the Dow Jones was breaking new high records, there would be celebrations on CNBC, just for an example. But when you hear the tone that they talk about people who own houses and that house prices are at the highest levels that they've ever been, they almost talk about it like it's a negative thing, like it becomes an affordability issue. But 2/3 of Americans own houses. So it's good for 60% of the nation.
That's super interesting, that perspective, yeah.
But I mean, granted, it probably is a little harder to qualify for a house. The payment, you could expect it to be a little bit higher. Maybe it's a little crunch on the budget, but
can I pause you and maybe go a little bit in depth on like what does that look like to someone who has no idea what it takes to buy a house? What do you even have to do to get, like, are there like steps to getting an approval letter? Like, because that's where it starts, right? Like,
what's the cleanse? Like the mortgage cleanse that you really have to. What mindset do you have to be in and sort of put your ducks in a row?
I think initially is how much of my grossly monthly income am I going to set aside to save, and at least 30% of that a month for quite a few years before you're going to start building some real money to start putting down as a down payment for sure. So getting on top of putting some saving aside, especially from your income monthly, is the biggest one. I think a lot of people that I'm speaking to now, is that They don't have that savings. A lot is coming from maybe borrowed gift fund, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
I have a question for you. So I am a renter right now, right? I'm like someone who's not in the industry, so I'm like very like school me on this, right? So if I'm coming to you and I say, can you explain the cost that not just your down payment, because there's other things you have to account for, right? Like inspection, how much like closing costs, like is there a certain percentage? Like if I'm coming to you for the first time saying, okay, I have 20 grand to put down. Okay, that's great, Michelle, but like what else do I need to account for financially above and beyond my down payment?
Well, every situation varies. Everything's a negotiation. Right. So if you have the down payment in a market like this, it's very conceivable that you can find a seller who would contribute towards your closing costs. And that's a possibility. And we've implemented that strategy a lot when rates have been higher.
You are seeing that a lot more now than you have, obviously in 2021. Right. When it was just,
they would have laughed you out of the house in 2021 if you asked for any type of concession.
What are sellers sometimes willing to do in this market?
Mostly give back money from the sale of the house to typically do one of two things. It's either to help the customer buy down the interest rate so the monthly payment's a bit more affordable, or give a credit to offset a large majority, if not all, of the closing costs.
How would you guide someone who wants to buy a home but doesn't really know what it takes in this market?
Well, we had somebody who fits this description to a T just recently. He had a really good job. He was earning six figures on the W-2. He had about $120,000 just sitting in a savings account. And that was his security blanket, having that money. But the reality of the situation is that money was losing money every single month that it just sat there doing nothing, right? Especially with the way inflation is right now.
Right.
You weren't seeing those kind of returns in a savings account, so his money was just sitting there devaluing itself. But for him, it felt good to have that, six figures in the bank. But his wife was like, we are done renting. We have two children. You have the money. You've got to take the plunge, and I spoke to this guy in great detail from the beginning of the process to the end, reassuring him that what he was doing wasn't a foolish move and that he would be okay and that, this was the next best step for his family. And, reluctantly, I think he ended up agreeing and, obviously went through with the transaction. And I believe his wife had, a big part in that. She pushed it along. But I bet if I were to ask him in 3 months, was this the best thing you ever did? I bet you he'll say yes. Once they're settled into that house, it becomes a home. He has that stability for his family. There's a different type of feeling that you get when you own a home as opposed to being a renter.
Sure.
You care a little bit more. You have the ability and the options to do what you want to the house, as opposed to you might have plans if you're a renter to do something, but you just don't, right? Because it's not yours at the end of the day. It really is a different type of mindset, I believe, when you own the property.
A lot of people struggle with keeping a good credit score, right? So what are some, if you're buying in the next year, 2, 3, what are some things to elevate your credit score to be, to qualify for a mortgage?
Yeah, when it comes to lines of credit or credit cards that you've got open, make sure that your usage is below 30%.
Okay.
When it gets over that 30%, and when these different credit bureaus are, monitoring that, the more it's getting towards your maximum, it's going to start to have more of a negative impact on your credit score, opposed to keeping that usage under 30%. So that's something really to bear in mind. Keeping on top of them payments as well, paying on time.
Those missed payments really do give you a deduction on your score. Yeah.
The closer it is to the time that you apply for a mortgage as well, is that it's gonna look it's gonna be more negative. It's gonna have a worse impact.
So if you buy a car tomorrow and you put a small down payment and you're making car payments, does that affect your credit score?
Well, yes, but not necessarily in a negative way. Okay. Maybe at first it would, right? Because typically when you open up a new line of credit, especially on a note loan like a car is, right? Your balance that you owe and the amount of your credit limit is very close to one another, and that's not good necessarily for your credit score. But over time, as you show a history of making the payments on time, it could actually be very beneficial to make, large size mortgage payments or loan payments on time consistently.
Now, since we were talking about credit scores, I remember, Noel, you sent me a flyer last week about the 600 FICO score, something like that.
Yeah.
To where, is that something that is nationwide, statewide, or is that something that only your company does? Like, what, can you go into that a little bit about how they, basically the gist of it, from what I understood, was that they now lowered the credit score to where you can qualify, if I'm, and please correct me and please explain, because I don't think I'm explaining it well.
No, sure. Yeah. It is nationwide. However, the loans cannot be originated in the states of New York and Washington right now. So they can be originated in 48 states, just not those two. And you're correct. Yes. I mean, we were used to dealing with a statewide down payment assistance program for so long, where initially it was 660. That's where it started. That's where the minimum credit score had to be. And then, a few years having the program and using it for a few years, dropped down to 640. But you still have a massive portion of people between 600 and 640, right, that aren't qualifiable yet. So what's great about this product is, I guess, by default, now that they do have a chance. So they would need a middle credit score of 600 to be eligible for the program.
What kind of program is that for?
It's for a 0% down payment program.
So like a down payment assistance program.
Correct.
Okay,
yes.
and is that for like specific loans or certain income brackets?
Sorry. Well, it's an FHA product.
It's an FHA product, yes.
Okay.
So, due to income rates, this is strong. So interest rate being high now.
To be fair to Noel, this is the first time I've ever made martinis. I was like, guys, I don't know if I'm going to do this right.
I took a sip
don't
and
know what's in it.
Seriously, I'm already hungover. Yes.
But I am chewing. I'm falling over my own words. So wait, thank you. And
something that you said stuck out to me though. You said 0% down payment, so like you don't even have to have a down payment to buy a house. Is that what that means?
The down payment portion of the transaction, yes, you wouldn't need to bring to the table.
And that's for an FHA loan.
It's FHA, yes.
And
just
is it
FHA.
under a certain income limit? Like you can't make more than $100,000. You have to make under 60.
So the great thing about this is it has no income cap.
Okay.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned before, we dealt with a statewide program as well, and that had an income cap depending on how many people in the household was borrowing. With this program, that's eliminated. It's not even there. So another great benefit to this program is the no income cap. Very attractive.
If you're doing a conventional loan, do they not have a down payment assistance program?
No, there is. There is for conventional right now, but
okay.
It's in the parameters that I was just talking about. So, you 640 minimum credit score. You do have income caps off the top of my head. I think it's somewhere 89,500 around that.
Okay.
For two borrowers. So, you do have a lot more restrictions than this program right now. So I think that's what's really attractive about this one.
Okay.
Is that, we don't have as many restrictions.
Can you guys sort of walk us through how to get an approval letter? So a lot of people think they're just going to start working with an agent and start looking at houses tomorrow. And a lot of agents obviously don't want to, they want to wait until someone has a pre-approval letter. So can you just walk us a little bit? Like tomorrow I call you, I've never owned a home. Tell me what I need to provide for you to approve me.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's so hard to put people into specific boxes when it comes to mortgages, right? Because there are so many programs that are available. So kind of going back to the question before, what should somebody do to get pre-approved? Really have a conversation with a mortgage lender.
Right.
Right. That's the first thing. Because had the conversation so many times where somebody would say to me, there's no way that I could ever be approved. And by the end of the conversation, it's like, no, you're actually approvable. And, there's that look on their face, like an aha moment, almost like, no way, really. So definitely start by talking to a mortgage lender. Walk them through your specific situation. Are you salaried? Are you hourly? Are you self-employed? What goes on with the way that you file your taxes, things like that. But for just the person coming in off the street, the very basics that we would look at is a copy of your credit report, some sort of way to verify your income, right? That could be through W-2s and pay stubs. It could be through tax returns. And on your credit report, it's going to show how much you're liable to pay credit obligations. So it's a combination of how much you could put down, how much you have in credit obligations, and that will pretty much equal how much of a house that you can afford. But that's definitely the first step, right? You want to get that piece kind of dialed in so that you can go shopping with confidence and know what your payments are going to be before you go out there. Mm-hmm. The process is not as terrifying as people make it out to be. It's actually quick, right? If somebody came into my office and they had the appropriate documents, it wouldn't even be an hour consultation before they would walk out of there with a letter.
A pre-approval,
yeah. So having the conversation and just having those basic documents ready to share will really give the loan person a good opportunity to figure out where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to maybe talk about, a lot of people will shop for rates and go through different mortgage companies to sort of figure out who's going to be helping them obtain that mortgage. Do you guys want to talk about, want to give a plug to your company, sort of what makes you a little bit different? Because obviously we're going to put your information, you're with United Mortgage. Tell us a little bit about, what your process is like and why people should give you a call tomorrow.
Well, we do have a very large array of products that we could offer. Conventional, FHA, that's all the standard stuff. But a lot of things that we have available to us where we can turn a buyer who maybe has been told by other banks that they're not a qualified candidate. And I think, that certainly helps to have outlets to programs like that because we're not pigeonholed to just what the guidelines are for conforming loans or FHA loans.
Yeah. So you have just a little bit more flexibility. Would that be a correct statement? Or
lots of flexibility.
Lots of flexibility.
Yeah,
that is really good to know. Yeah.
Not only the flexibility, I think what you touched on there is the amount of programs that we do have. We've got such a catalogue of programs, and that's why I think Stephen was touching on to speak to a lender first, because you never know what loan program you could fit into or what might suit you. And what's great about working for United is the options, the options to be able to offer people.
Yeah.
It's not just your standard, conventional FHA, VA type of place. It's a mortgage bank, but we're also able to broker as well. We've just got access to so many great programs.
Can I pause you guys and zoom out for a second? Stephen, you said you've been doing mortgages how many years?
Since around 2000.
And Noel, for you got into mortgages when you got to Vegas?
Well, there was 2 years I couldn't work for, but once I acquired my green card and I was my working visa, that's when I was introduced to Stephen. Actually, I knew that I always wanted to work for myself. Especially if I was moving to somewhere like America or Vegas, I knew that it was great for networking. I knew something like an opportunity like this was, how far can you run with it, really? And that's how successful you will be.
Especially with that accent. You just probably walk into any Subway and people are like, yes.
They're just throwing footlongs at me.
I didn't even know I needed a mortgage until you said hello and put mayo on that turkey sub.
Like, what I'm fascinated by is like what got you into mortgages? Because a lot of people that they want to get into real estate, but you never really think mortgages, even though mortgages behind the scenes seems like the move. So I'm curious, Stephen, too, like how you got into mortgages, what fascinated you by getting into it.
And I know that taking the exam just to get your mortgage license
Difficult.
is not easy. And I know a lot of people. I think it's like a 60% fail rate. I don't quote me on that, but
No, you're right. You're
so
right.
can we get some applause for Stephen and Noel?
Right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's
You
the first
smarty
time.
pants.
The first time anyone takes the test, there's a 60% fail rate.
Yeah.
The
Wow.
first time they take it, yeah.
We won't ask you guys if you passed on the first one. Well, that'll be offline.
Yeah. Well, I had such a great mentor. It would be silly if I didn't.
Yeah.
That was a round of applause for
Flashcards.
Stephen.
Stephen.
I said, do it with flashcards. And that was
He was right. Yeah, he was right. He said, make your
Old
own
school.
flashcards. Don't-
Are you guys
don't rely on
licensed
this."
only in Nevada or other?
I am, but Stephen in the branch holds way more licenses. So
That's awesome.
yeah, take it.
Yeah.
Okay.
California, Arizona, Texas, state of Washington, Florida, and New York.
Nice.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Smarty pants.
Thank you.
Stephen, talk about 2008. Were you around for that
Totally.
debacle?
Oh, wipe me out. Yeah.
So we actually just had one of the top real estate agents on our podcast, and she was talking about how 2008 was just, for her, just devastating to watch what people were going through. What were you seeing? Because you were on a different side than the agents.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, well, first off, the years leading up to it were just, it was incredible. You just couldn't believe the programs and the ways in which you can do loans. Like I remember this one file in particular. The guy was a New York City bus driver, right? So it doesn't take very much to figure. Their salaries are public knowledge, just like any municipal worker, right?
Yeah.
So there was a loan. It was called stated, right? So I was like, okay, $8,500 a month. No, it doesn't work. $9,500 a month. No, still doesn't. $10,500 he makes a month, right? And the loan would go through.
Wow.
Yeah, so there was things that were, there were like that. There was these crazy loans where they would give you 4 different payment options, right? One of the payment options was minuscule in comparison to what, say, like the full payment would be. And people would always go for that payment, but not realizing at the same time the variance that you didn't make from the full payment, if you made that small payment, was added on to the balance of your loan. Right, it's called negative amortization. You don't see that kind of stuff anymore, and it was just ripe for the fall.
Why was it so easy? Was it difficult to buy a home the years prior to that, to where they made it so easy to buy a home, to where it got taken advantage of and hit a bubble? Like, why was it like, the classic story where it's like you see strippers have like 5 homes or something crazy like that? Like, why did it get so wild? Like, what was the catalyst that caused those types of loans to be so easy for people?
Sure. I don't want to talk politics, but there was an initiative by the administration that was in office at that time for everybody to buy a house, right? So they started the ball rolling, and even before that administration, that
was like mid to late 90s?
So I'll just say the guy's name. It was George Bush, right?
Good old George.
Little W. Little W.
It's W. So
hey, I'm from Texas. Hey, I know people that love little W.
But it started before. It started with the Clinton administration, and then the Bush administration just carried it on and really encouraged their buddies in Wall Street to get more products out there. And then the Wall Streeters, if you will, just started making up these crazy concoctions and bundling these loans together and, selling them in the secondary market. And I mean, a lot of people made a lot of money and then subsequently lost a lot of money with it too. But I mean, really, I probably think a lot of it was rooted in greed. While they had the right intentions, to make people homeowners, I mean, the programs just didn't make any type of sense, which is also why, fast forward to 2023, I keep on hearing a lot of the people who were like shell shocked by that time, like it's going to happen again, right? We're right there.
Another 2008's coming. Yep.
Right. But it's not, right? One, because of the inventory and the supply and demand that we were just talking about, but the vast majority of people who have a mortgage qualified for that mortgage by what's called the ATR, which stands for the ability to repay. So that means their income at the time was verified to be a certain amount, and they qualified for that loan based on those standards. Even the people who are doing these off-brand loans, like a little bit we were talking about before, they're putting massive down payments into these loans, minimum 25%, sometimes 30 and 35%. So it stands to reason that when somebody writes a check for a 25-35% down payment, it's a pretty safe bet that they're going to perform on that loan, that they're going to make those payments on time. And if they do get into trouble, they'll have the option to sell it because they'll have that equity stake in it, right? So I don't see it falling apart for the reasons of we're making bad loans again, because we're not making bad loans anymore. There are other things in the economy that could certainly put a bump in the housing market. That's any time, right? But it's not going to be because of cowboy type loans where you were just squeezing everybody into the stripper example, for example. That doesn't fly anymore.
Now, what do you say to people that are sitting on the sidelines right now and they're like, yeah, I'm just going to wait for the housing market to crash before I buy a house?
Then you'll be waiting with the same people that was waiting during the pandemic, probably.
I say I'll hold my breath.
Yeah.
Come look for me with the blue face.
You're gonna miss that. Yeah, you're gonna miss that house that you wanted.
Yeah,
for sure.
Especially here in Vegas, like more of like a local thing because of what Vegas is building and how much we're doing here.
Vegas is a unique market. Would you say?
Yes, not independently unique. I think like Florida's doing really fantastic right now, and
sure.
Right, but it's on the short list of one of the best performing cities through all of this. Like say post COVID for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is fascinating, and
I want to also, being that this is a Vegas podcast, I'm curious to know like your favorite spots, whether it's restaurants, happy hours, buffets, entertainment shows. I'm curious, on or off the strip. We could start with Noel and go around with Michelle and even Mary if you want to chime in. But I'm interested in, what do we like to do here in Vegas as locals?
Totally.
It could be the strip, it could be off the strip, whatever you like to do. What's your thing?
This is going to sound a bit strange. However, I really like a day out in either Boulder City or Pahrump.
Yeah,
that's not strange. Boulder is so cute.
Right. I love to go to Boulder. Just, go from either pub to pub, because we've got some pubs there.
Pubs.
So you do have a pub there.
Great ice cream shop, too.
Yes, that is great ice cream.
And vintage.
That's what I was going to say.
Antiques.
It's them antiques.
Yeah.
Them thrift shops. I can spend hours in there.
Boulder is the cutest city. People don't even know. Yeah.
And it's the city where like the
I would retire there.
Yeah.
100%. Because you've got that beautiful view of the lake.
Yeah.
You get a bit more wind on there because of the lake as well. So that's nice. And I love the town centre and the walk through the town centre there. It is historical. Yeah. It does have history.
Absolutely.
And I love to go into Pahrump because of, is it Pahrump? Pahrump.
I kind of like.
I'm like Pahrump.
I like the way you just said it though.
Pahrump. Sorry.
What do you like to do in Pahrump? Because I've never been to Pahrump.
The wineries, they're free.
What do you mean?
You go to a winery.
It's like, let's go now.
Right. What are we doing here?
You go to a winery and it's like it's a free tasting, and then they'll pair it with some nice chocolate or cheese, and it's a day out.
Okay.
All right, when
are we going?
It's like less than an hour away, right?
Yeah, less than about 45 minutes, 50-minute drive. And it's a free day out, guys. Just go from winery to winery.
I love it. Stephen, what do you like to do?
Well, having 2 young children, I don't necessarily.
So you're on the strip every night.
Yeah, exactly. I don't get out there too much, but I think I don't know if I can convey this into words really properly, but if I was in New York and we wanted to do something, say like in the city, right? You got to get on the train, you got to travel in, and you're going to get tolls and taxes and so on and so forth, right? There's just a lot of things that are very accessible, and that can be done with a lot of convenience. And I think that helps a lot when you have kids.
100%.
Yeah,
absolutely. Michelle, give us your hidden gem that you've discovered in your month of Vegas living.
Well, I don't know if I have a hidden gem, but I'll tell you what I love to do. Coming from Chicago, where it's either always cold or humid, and everything is expensive and hard to get to. Like anything fun, let's go downtown, but it's like, oh, I have to pay $30 a day for parking. Like, you know, so anything I can do outside, like literally, if I could be McDonald's, if I could eat outside, I'm going to eat outside. Like that's how basic I am. No, but anything that I can, like, I love eating, but if I can just be outside and enjoying like the vacation like vibes, I'm for it. It doesn't matter where it is, when it is. If I can just be outside, that's where I want to go.
Yeah, totally. In fact, you've told us about places that we're like, we've been here for 5 years and we've never been there. Like, you're very adventurous. For as little time that you've lived here in Vegas, you've really gotten the city down.
That's just because I drive around all day and look at different places. Because otherwise, how am I going to get to know the area? I don't work.
Absolutely.
I work, you know, so it's like, how else am I going to get to know the city?
So speaking of the city, I think the Chinatown.
We love Chinatown. We're obsessed.
This Chinatown is unbelievable, and it's accessible. So Chicago has a great Chinatown, but it's so hard to get to, and you have to sit on
parking is a pain.
shady train line. This Chinatown, you can park anywhere, and you can get the craziest, coolest. You can get there's a Korean hot dog with cheese on it, and you can just go grab one for $5. And park right in front of there's just, and it's like, it's crazy because the tourism here, they've caught on, you know, people come to Vegas. Yes, they love the Strip. Don't get me wrong. But there's so many other parts of town that people are so obsessed with. And I think Chinatown, I think we have one of the best Chinatowns. And I think the chefs here in Vegas they don't compare to anywhere else in the world. If you're going to be a chef in Vegas, you better be good.
And
Damn
I live
good.
half a mile from Chinatown, and I'm sad to say I've never been, but I promise I'm going to go.
Okay,
Yeah.
Korean hot dog. Korean hot dog.
Korean hot dog.
And then you got to get this fish pancake ice cream thing. Just trust me. We'll make a plug in the
The way
bottom.
you said it doesn't sound good, but it's a
just
wafer.
Shaped like it's a wafer.
It's like a dessert wafer. Because
Yeah.
when you say fish pancake on ice cream, people are going to think
Okay, there's no actual fish in there, but it's like
Okay, 'cause I can't do fish.
it's like this wafer that's on top of the cone of the froyo. It's really delicious.
I mean, we should ask the guy from New York what the Chinese is like in Las Vegas, right?
Yeah, tell us.
Because
what-
it's
New York.
notoriously great in New York.
Yeah,
100%, hands down.
I mean, I love Las Vegas, but it lacks when it comes to Chinese takeout.
takeout. Okay.
Yeah, Chinese takeout.
I've heard also Mexican is a lack here in Vegas. People are like, go to LA if you want really good Mexican.
Oh, I just went to
I need
San
to chime in
Diego.
real
It was
fast on that.
amazing. Best
Yeah?
Mexican I ever had. San
Yeah?
Diego.
I
Yeah.
need to chime in on this Mexican. I need to chime in on this Mexican food. Okay. So I love Mexican food, but Vegas. I love Vegas so much, but Vegas, can we please audit at an authentic hole-in-the-wall Mexican restaurant?
I got
can
one
we
for you.
please not put Taco Bell shredded cheddar cheese? That is not a taco. You need
Onions
real
and cilantro.
white melting quesadilla cheese on a taco. You can't sprinkle it with Taco Bell cheese. Like, stop doing that. To anybody listening, please get white quesadilla
Queso.
melting cheese on your tacos.
All right,
That's
I'll
it.
say there's a place called Taqueria Casa del Sabor. It's on Sahara and let's say Sahara and Jones.
Yep.
Somewhere in that vicinity. They have a big sign that says best tacos in Las Vegas, and they live up to it. It's always a long line, and instead of sprinkling cheese, it's always onion and cilantro, and it's fantastic. And it's kind of, I wouldn't say hole in the wall, but it's not the kind of place where you want to get dressed up or anything like that. It's just your
those are the best
casual, it's 24/7, it's fantastic. So that's my when it comes to taquerias and
That's my only gripe
tacos,
so far about
tacos
Vegas,
in
but I think it's
Vegas.
pretty good.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
if lack of Mexican food and maybe
No, the cheese,
Chinese
the Mexican
takeout is what we're lacking here, you guys,
It's
I
not so
think
bad, right?
we're on to something
We're
otherwise.
nitpicking, yeah.
So, Stephen and Noel, you guys are amazing. We're going to make sure to add all your contact information. And honestly, the takeaway here is make the phone call, reach out to your lenders, and find out what it is that you need to do to put yourself in a better situation. And also, it doesn't have to happen tomorrow, but what do I need to do in a year from now? And obviously, home ownership is one of the biggest goals that I think a lot of people need to have in their, pocket. So make that phone call.
I think it's a really difficult thing for somebody to take on their own, and try and do the research themselves, or, go online and, go into a big rabbit hole of what they should do. Stephen is 100% right. Pick up the phone, because let's make a plan together. You're not the expert here, nor do we expect you to be. And, this math is a difficult thing, guys. Numbers are a hard thing. So, pick up the phone and speak to someone just so they're able to give you all the options that are available and going to be beneficial.
And if nothing else, you get to talk to a guy with a British accent. I think that's or a New Yorker. I mean, those are two hot commodities.
Best, yeah.
And
right, yeah. I start the phone conversation and then I pass it on to Steven.
Yeah, and you get the best of both worlds.
And I think the results might surprise you, right? Because I think a lot of people think the process is difficult and that they won't qualify, and then maybe they're not good enough in some way, shape, or form. But if you don't know and you don't talk to somebody who knows what they're doing, you're really doing yourself a disservice. So many times I've sat across from somebody and they're like, "Wait a second, you mean to tell me I could buy something right now?" I'm like, "Dude, yeah, right now, go."
For this amount.
Yeah, and I mean, and they get up from the table, and then within a couple of days, they're signing a contract, and that could be anybody, but it just starts with getting the information, speaking to somebody, and either forming a plan or finding out that you might be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. So there you have it. You call United Mortgage and you get your loan approval, and then you call David Gavry. You start looking at homes tomorrow.
That's what I'm going to do.
And we have our client over here, Michelle.
What will happen is people will call David Gavry and they said, "Hey, have you spoken to United Mortgage?"
Yes.
Well, no, but really, for the person who is looking for a home, you want to know, what do you qualify for first, right? Before you go out shopping and then get your hopes up and then realize, because that can blow up too, right? You can get deep into the transaction process only to find out that, wait a minute, this won't work. So before wasting all that time, talk to Noel, talk to Steven, figure out how to move forward best and most professionally. And then from there, let's go shopping. Let's do the fun stuff.
Absolutely.
Let's do the fun stuff.
Speaking of fun, this was really fun. Thank you all for being here tonight. This was awesome.
These martinis were really fun.
We know.
Mind erasers.
Mortgage and martinis.
Heavy
you guys have
editing.
been amazing.
Awesome. Cheers to all of you. Thank you again for being here.
Coming on our podcast. Cheers.
Thank you for subscribing to Vegas Faces on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok under the name Gavry Group. That's Gavri Group. Thanks, everybody. See you at the next episode.